My name is Julia Smith, and this is my EDFD 400 Prezi, outlining what I have learned throughout the course. The three main learning and developmental theories I'm going to be discussing are behaviorism, constructivism, and cognitive science. The main question that I had to consider during the class was, what is learning? Let's start off with behaviorism. Behavior theorists look at how new behavior is acquired. They also look at what they can do to get kids to do what they want them to do with classical conditioning. They primarily focus on behaviors that they can observe. Learning is the action of acquiring new behavior based on the environmental conditions. The theorists that studied behaviorism include Thorndike, Pavlov, Plato, Locke, and B.F. Skinner. Let's take a look at Thorndike first. Edward L. Thorndike developed the law of exercise. The law of exercise described the condition that can be modified between a situation in which someone is currently in and the response between a situation. When their response is followed with a satisfying state of affair, the connection between the situation and the response strengthens. However, if their response is followed with a dissatisfying state of affair, the strength decreases. The picture here provides a nice visual to explain the law of exercise. Let's say that a dog is in a cage. It paces around not knowing what to do. And since the behavior is not the correct behavior that the observer is looking for, the dog is left in a dissatisfying state of affair because it is still in the cage. The second response of crying produces the same outcome. However, if the dog trips the lever, which is what the observer wanted it to do, it is able to escape, leaving the dog in a satisfying state of affair, thus increasing the connection between the situation and the response. The next time that the dog is placed in the cage, which is the stimulus, it automatically trips the lever because, as previously stated, the connection between the situation and the response is stronger now. Now let's take a look at Pavlov's view on classical conditioning. Classical conditioning has to do with the association between objects. It is an automatic type of learning in which a stimulus acquires the capacity to create a response that was originally created with a different stimulus. Pavlov looked at the salivation of dogs and tried to get them to change the stimulus that gets them to salivate from food, which is the unconditioned stimulus, to a bell, which would be then the conditioned stimulus. He started off by observing the dogs salivate when food was placed in front of them. Then he would introduce the bell as the neutral stimulus, which did not elicit a conditioned response. He would then introduce the ring of the bell and the food at the same time to get the dog to salivate. Eventually the dog would salivate upon hearing the bell ring, which would make that a conditioned stimulus and response. The third theorist I'm going to talk about associated with behaviorism is Plato. Plato's theory of learning says that an individual can only reach justice or excellence when they develop their abilities to their fullest potential. Plato came up with a few theories to support his belief, such as the myth of the forgetful river, and the allegory of the cave. I will explain the allegory of the cave. 3 prisoners were chained to a wall facing the cave wall for their whole life. All they were able to see from the outside of the cave were the shadows on the cave walls that the fire would cast. One prisoner finally was released to view the outside world. He was able to picture the world from what it looked like from a different perspective. When he learned this, he went back to his other friends that were still chained up and told them about it, and then tried to unchain them so that they would be able to view the different perspective as well. They refused and dismissed what he told them. They were content with what the world looked like with the shadows on the wall. Their prior knowledge of the world impeded the possibility for them to gain new knowledge. They were not willing to accept the fact that the world looks different than what they previously believed. They prefer their perspective from within the cave. The lesson of this story is that teaching is the process of releasing people from the chains of ignorance. Let's move on to the theorist Locke. Locke had a model called the Lockean atomistic model. Locke believed, unlike Plato, that when someone is born, they were born with a blank slate. They did not have any prior knowledge. This is referred to as tabula rasa, which literally means blank slate. Even though he believes that we were born with a blank slate, he still realized that there must be some kind of power or ability that we obtain to perform operations that lie dormant until they are tapped into. The final theorist I will talk about under the topic of behaviorism is B.F. Skinner. Skinner created a Skinner box with the idea of operant conditioning in mind, in which behavior is controlled by consequences. Here is a video that explains his Skinner box with operant conditioning.
So B.F. Skinner studied rats and pigeons in an operant conditioning chamber, which is called a Skinner box. Inside the Skinner box, they have a food dispenser and a lever that the rat can press. Other conditioning chambers have things such as lights as well. Now you might wonder, why did Skinner look at rats and pigeons in a Skinner box? Well, it turns out that what he learned from the Skinner box can be applied to humans, meaning the information from the animals generalizes to human behavior as well. First, we want to know, why does the rat first press the lever? Well, it turns out rats are exploratory creatures, meaning they will walk around their environment and check it out. And so when the rat is first placed in the Skinner box, it may go over to the corner, stand up and smell the walls, but eventually it may come over and bump into the lever or stand on it to smell something up here. When that first occurrence happens, we can deliver a food pellet to the rat. But how do we get the rat to press the lever again? We can get the rat to press the lever through the process of shaping. And shaping is reinforcing successive approximations to the final target behavior. So if the rat were standing over here in the corner, I wouldn't deliver a food pellet. However, if the rat started to approach the lever, I could deliver a food pellet. Eventually, you reinforce those behaviors that are closest to the final one. Shaping is important for many of our operant conditioning behaviors.
Now that we've talked about behaviorism, let's move on to the second topic of learning that I've chosen to explain, which is constructivism. Constructivist theorists believe that learning is a social process carried out between a more knowledgeable person and a less knowledgeable person. The theorist Jean Piaget explains this quite nicely. He, as well as the theorist Dewey, believed that our ability to think and learn is an adaptive feature. He believed that children were born with very little equipment to control their behaviors. He also believed that children construct a schema for complex activities that they learn. A schema, a schema is the comparison of the human brain to a computer, which is similar to a computer program. Piaget believed that the meaning of the world is not given to us, but by us. We figure out the meaning of the world by ourselves. Piaget created developmental stages in which he believed humans went through. The first stage is the sensory motor stage, which is birth to 2 years old. In this stage, he believed that we do not know how to do things. In the second stage, which is the pre-operational stage, from 2 years to 7 years old, he believed that someone can show us how to do something in order for us to learn it. The third stage is the concrete operational stage from 7 years old to 11 years old. We are able to learn and do things by ourselves in this stage. And the final stage is the formal operational stage from adolescence to adulthood. We are able to figure out things alone in this stage and abstractly think about them. Piaget also created 6 concrete operations. They include seriation, classification, reversibility, conservation, decentering, and transitivity. I will go into detail about conservation. Conservation is the ability to understand that the quantity of a substance will remain the same no matter what shape it takes form. In this picture, the teacher displays the same amount of water in the cup and explains that to the student. The teacher then pours the water of one of the cups into a tall, skinny cup. The teacher does this right in front of the child, so it's obvious that the intention of the teacher is not to trick the child. The teacher then asks the child to point to the cup that contains the most water. The child points to the tall, skinny cup. This tells us that the child did not quite understand the operation of conservation. She does not understand that changing the shape of the cup holding the water does not change the quantity of water. Now that we've talked about constructivism, let's move on to the final topic of learning that I'm going to explain, which is cognitive science. Theorists of cognitive science have a question to think about. They are concerned with how the brain works. The computer metaphor of the mind is basically what it sounds like. It's a metaphor or analogy between a computer and the human mind. Theorists compared the computer to the human mental processing. An example of the computer metaphor of the mind in the school setting is portrayed in this chart. Students' minds represent computer memory. They have stored information. The teachers represent the computer program. A computer program possesses a collection of instructions to perform tasks. Similar to that, a teacher possesses a lot of knowledge and can program the computer or student mind so that they can remember it. The instruction that the teacher gives the student would correlate to the computer's intake of information, and the schoolwork would compare to the computer's output, so the display of knowledge that the computer or student possess can be showcased. Motivation is also discussed by cognitive science theorists, specifically Carol Dweck, who believe that there are 2 types of motivational mindsets. The first type of motivational mindset is a fixed mindset. If a student has a fixed mindset, they believe that they have certain abilities, intelligence, and talents, and their goal is to look smart all the time and to avoid looking uneducated. If a student has a growth mindset, they believe that their current abilities, talents, and intelligence can be advanced to the next level with effort. Their belief that putting hard work in can help develop anyone to increase their intelligence. I'm now going to go back to the main question that I had considered during this class. What is learning? Learning to me is being able to take in information, process that information, and then explain what that information means in your own words. In this Prezi, I have done just that with all the information that I have learned about human development and learning in the course of EDFD 400. Thank you.